All right, everyone, get ready, because today we are going deep on the NDPR.
The NDPR.
Yeah, Nigeria's data protection regulation.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of a big deal, and we're going to figure out why it matters to, well, you. You know how these days we basically live online?
Yeah.
Well, data protection is, it's becoming more and more important. And not just in Nigeria, but, like, globally.
It's interesting, actually. You know, Nigeria is right up there with the big players when it comes to data protection. Like, think EU's GDPR. They're taking it seriously.
Yeah, totally. When I was prepping for this deep dive, I was honestly surprised, like, how closely the NDPR aligns with those global standards. It's a statement.
It is.
Okay, so for those who aren't super familiar with data protection,
Yeah.
what is it, really?
You can think of it as, well, like a shield for your personal information. It's a whole system, practices, rules, even the legal stuff, all designed to stop people from messing with your data. You know, using it without your, snooping around, all that. It's all about giving you control.
So bigger than just privacy, then.
Exactly. Privacy is a big part of it, but it's not the whole picture.
Right.
In this digital age where companies are collecting tons of data all the time,
Yeah.
it can feel like privacy is, vanishing. The NDPR is like a referee, I guess you could say, making sure businesses are playing fair and not crossing any lines with our information.
So the NDPR, it's like a set of guidelines, then.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
It's built on these 7 core principles, like the foundation of data protection, really.
Okay, I like that.
These principles guide organizations to make sure they're processing data legally and fairly.
And transparently.
Yes, transparency too.
All right, so what's the first one?
Number 1. It's pretty straightforward, actually. Lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. Like a 3-in-1 package. Ha!
Nice.
Data has to be handled legally, treated fairly, and everything needs to be open. You're never in the dark about what's happening to your information. No shady business, you know.
I like that.
Right.
Okay, what about number 2?
Number 2 is purpose limitation. This one makes sure your data is only used for the reason it was collected. Think of it this way. You sign up for a newsletter, right?
Yeah.
And they start sending you marketing emails for stuff you never asked for. That's a no-no under the NDPR. They can't just repurpose your data without your consent.
So it's like a contract almost.
Exactly.
I give you my data for this.
Right.
You use it for that.
Yeah.
No funny business.
Aha, precisely.
Okay, cool.
Now, think about this. The less data a company has on you, the less risk, right?
Makes sense.
That's where data minimization comes in. Keeping things lean and mean, only collecting the bare minimum they need.
No data hoarding.
Exactly.
Love it. What's next?
Accuracy. Making sure any data they have on you is correct. And up to date.
Up to date, right.
Yeah, like imagine applying for a loan
Oh, yeah.
and you get denied because of a typo in your credit report.
Ouch.
That's what the NDPR tries to prevent. You have the right to correct any mistakes in your data.
So you're saying it's like having the power to fact-check your own data, basically.
Exactly.
That's awesome. What about the last 3?
Okay, so number 5 is storage limitation. Basically, companies can't just keep your data forever. They need a clear time frame for how long they'll keep it, and then they delete it. Securely, of course. It's like your data has an expiration date.
I like that.
Right.
Okay, what about the final 2?
The 6th one is all about, well, it boils down to security, integrity, and confidentiality.
Mm-hmm.
You need strong measures in place to protect your data from cyber attacks, unauthorized access, anything that could compromise it. Think of it like a fortress around your
You
data.
need a digital security detail 24/7.
Haha, yeah, something like that.
All right, I like it.
And last but not least, accountability. This one puts the responsibility on the organizations to prove they're actually doing things right. They can't just say it, they got to show it. Through audits, documentation, internal processes, the whole 9 yards.
Show their work, basically.
Yeah.
So it's great that the NDPR puts so much emphasis on transparency and accountability, but who's actually making sure this works?
Well, you have NITDA, of course. They're the watchdog, making sure everyone's following the rules, keeping an eye on everything, data protection.
So they're like, what, the data police?
Haha, yeah, you could say that. Then you have DPCOs.
DPC?
Data Protection Compliance Organizations, licensed by NITDA to provide compliance services, like intermediaries, you know?
So like data protection consultants.
Precisely. Bridging the gap between the regulations and the people who need to follow them.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's not just about the regulators and consultants, is it?
Right.
What about the organizations collecting and using our data?
So first you have the data controllers. The big decision makers calling the shots about how your data is used.
Like what? Data strategists?
Exactly. Banks, government agencies, even social media platforms, all data controllers.
So they control how our data is used.
Yeah, they're the ones in the driver's seat. And then you have the data processors. Think of them like the hands-on data handlers. They actually do the processing, but on behalf of the data controller.
So like a cloud provider or
Oh, yeah.
something.
Or a payroll company or any organization that manages data for another entity.
So they're the ones crunching the numbers, storing the info, all that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, I see. But what about me?
You.
Yeah, where do I fit into all this?
You're the data subject.
Data subject.
Yep, that's the term.
That sounds kind of impersonal.
It does, I know. It's a legal term. But really, you're the star of the show when it comes to your data. The NDPR gives you specific rights, like the right to know what data is being collected about you, how it's being used, even to request it be corrected or deleted.
Okay, I like that much better.
Right.
So it's not just about businesses following rules.
No.
It's about individuals having rights.
Exactly.
And actually being able to use them.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So we've talked about a lot of terms. Let's define some more.
Sure.
Let's decode the data lingo.
Okay, first up, personal data. Pretty straightforward. It's any information that can identify you, directly or indirectly.
So like my name, address, all that.
Obviously. But it's broader than that. Think about your IP address, your browsing history, even your location data.
Oh, wow.
All that can identify you, even if it's not directly tied to your name. Basically, if it can be traced back to you, it's personal data.
Okay, so a pretty wide range of things.
Yeah.
And then what about sensitive personal data? That sounds serious.
It is. It's like the VIP section of your data, the really confidential stuff that needs extra protection.
Okay.
We're talking health records, biometric data like fingerprints, facial scans, even your religious beliefs, political views. All that falls under sensitive personal data.
So it's the stuff that needs extra safeguard.
Precisely.
Got it. What about data that's anonymized?
Good question. Anonymized data has been processed to remove all personal identifiers. It's like giving your data a new, completely anonymous identity.
So it's not considered personal under the NDPR.
Exactly. It can still be useful, like for research, but since it can't be linked back to you, it's outside the scope of the regulation.
Cool. Okay, so we've covered the history, the principles. Now we know who the players are and what kinds of data we're dealing with.
That's a great summary. But remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore about how the NDPR actually works, what it means for you every day.
Well, that's why we're doing a whole deep dive on it. Stick with us, and we'll unpack all the practical stuff, real-world examples, all that. We'll equip you to navigate the data world like a pro.
Exactly. So we've got the basics down, but how does this all actually affect you?
Yeah, like the principles and stakeholders sound good, but do they actually protect me in real life?
Okay, well, think about all the times you share information online.
Yeah.
Shopping, social media, even just signing up for newsletters. The NDPR is like a safety net and make sure those companies are handling your data, well, responsibly.
So it's like, what, a digital guardian angel?
Haha, exactly. It gives you peace of mind. You know that there are rules in place to prevent your data from being misused.
Okay, I like that. Can you give me an example?
Sure.
Like, let's say I'm signing up for a new online service.
Okay.
How do those principles actually come into play?
Remember lawfulness, fairness, and transparency?
Yeah.
Well, that means they can't hide behind confusing legal jargon in their privacy policy. They have to be clear about how they're using your data, what they're collecting, why they need it, how long they'll keep it.
So no more shady practices buried in the fine print.
In theory, no.
Okay, good.
And remember, purpose limitation.
Yeah.
That means if you give them your email for a newsletter, they can't just turn around and use it to send you marketing emails for stuff you never wanted.
So it's a contract, basically. I give you data for this, you use it for that, no tricks.
Precisely.
Cool, I like that.
And then there's data minimization.
Right.
The less data they have, the less risk.
Right, makes sense.
So they should only collect what's absolutely necessary.
So they shouldn't be asking a million questions just to sign up for something simple.
That's the idea.
Got it.
And if they do have data on you, the accuracy principle ensures that it's right. And up to date.
Up to date, yeah.
Like imagine being denied a loan because of a typo in your credit report.
Ouch.
Yeah, not fun. That's what this principle is trying to prevent.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've talked about collecting data, making sure it's correct. What about hanging on to it for too long?
That's storage limitation. They can't just hoard your data forever. They need a clear policy for how long they'll keep it. And then they have to delete it securely when it's not needed anymore.
It's like hitting the delete button on outdated information.
Exactly.
I like that.
You have the right to a clean slate, digitally speaking.
Okay, cool. What about keeping data safe from hackers?
That's integrity and confidentiality. It's all about security, really. Strong encryption, access controls, regular checks, having a plan if there's a breach. Think of it like building a fortress around your data.
Right, a digital fortress.
Okay, that makes me feel better. But what if a company doesn't take this seriously?
Well, that's where accountability comes in.
Yeah.
They have to actually prove they're following the rules. Not just say they are, but show it. Audits, documentation, all that.
So there are real consequences if they mess up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
NITDA can step in, fines, even stopping their data processing activities completely.
Wow, they can't just ignore this then.
Nope.
It's good to know that there are real repercussions.
It is. But, the NDPR isn't just about protecting individuals.
Really?
Yeah, it can actually affect Nigeria as a whole.
How so?
Well, when people feel like their data is safe, they're more likely to trust online services. And that can lead to economic growth, innovation, even foreign investment.
So it's like building a safer digital environment can boost the economy.
Exactly.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
But beyond the economy, it's also about protecting human rights.
Human rights.
Yeah, like the right to privacy and
Yeah.
make sure you have control over your information in this, this digital age. So the NDPR is trying to balance innovation and individual rights.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. It's about creating a society that's data-driven, but also ethical.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Sure.
Well, let's go back to the companies handling our data.
Okay.
The data controllers and data processors.
Right.
What are their responsibilities?
They're crucial. Remember, data controllers are the ones making the decisions about how data is used. So they have to make sure all those decisions are within the rules of the NDPR.
Right. They're the strategists.
Exactly.
So what are some of their key responsibilities?
Well, they need clear data protection policies. They have to have strong security in place. They need to get consent from people when necessary and be transparent about their practices.
So no more hiding how they use our data.
Exactly. They're also responsible for appointing a data protection officer if needed.
A data protection officer.
Yeah, think of them as the internal champion for data protection at the company. They advise on compliance, monitor things, and act as a point of contact for anyone with concerns.
So they're like the data protection superheroes, making sure everyone follows the rules.
Haha, yeah, something like that.
I like it. What about the data processors then?
They're the ones actually handling the data, doing the processing, but on behalf of the data controller.
Right, they're the ones doing the actual work. But they're not just blindly following orders, are they?
No, not at all. They have their own set of responsibilities.
Okay.
They can only process data according to the controller's instructions. They need strong security, too. And they have to maintain confidentiality.
So it's a team effort.
Yeah, you could say that.
The controller sets the plan, the processor carries it out.
Right.
But they both have to follow the rules.
Exactly. It's all about coordination and a shared commitment to data privacy.
This is making a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
But is the NDPR actually effective?
That's a great question.
Like, are companies really following these rules?
Well, it's still relatively new, and like any regulation, there are challenges.
So it's not perfect.
No regulation is. But it's definitely had a positive impact.
Okay.
It's raised awareness about data privacy. Companies are taking it more seriously. It's a foundation for better data governance, really.
So it's a work in progress, but it's headed in the right direction.
Absolutely. It's a journey, and it takes everyone working together.
Okay, so what about us as individuals? What can we do to protect our own data?
You shouldn't just hope that companies are following the rules.
Right.
You can be proactive.
Yeah.
First, be careful what you share online.
Yeah.
Don't just blindly give out your information. Read those privacy policies. I know they're boring. But pay attention to what permissions you're giving to apps and websites.
So be a conscious data sharer, not just clicking accept on everything.
Exactly.
Got it.
And don't assume your data is safe. Take steps to protect it yourself.
Like what?
Use strong passwords. Enable two-factor authentication. Watch out for phishing scams and suspicious links.
Be a digital detective.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to use your rights under the NDPR.
Okay.
If you have questions about how a company's handling your data, ask. You can also complain to NITDA if you think your rights have been violated.
So we can speak up if something doesn't seem right.
Absolutely. You're not powerless. By knowing your rights and using them, you're contributing to a culture of data protection.
That's really empowering. But technology changes so fast. Are there any new challenges in data protection that we should be aware of?
That's a great point. Data protection isn't static, it's always evolving. And one of the biggest challenges is, well, how fast technology is moving.
Yeah, it seems like it changes every day.
I know, right? Things like AI, machine learning, the Internet of Things. They're generating huge amounts of data and creating new privacy concerns that we're still figuring out.
So it's like technology is moving faster than the regulations can keep up.
Sometimes, yeah, it's a challenge to keep data protection laws relevant when things are changing so quickly.
Okay, I see. What else is on the horizon?
Well, another trend is the globalization of data. Data moves across borders all the time now, which makes it harder to enforce laws and ensure consistent privacy standards everywhere.
So data is like a global citizen now.
Haha, yeah, you could say that.
Yeah, that sounds complicated.
It is. It brings up questions about jurisdiction, international cooperation, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But it's not all bad news.
Yeah.
New technologies are being developed to improve privacy, and organizations are getting better at data governance.
That's reassuring.
It is. It's a constant evolution.
Right. We're all learning as we go.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about how the NDPR applies to different industries.
Yeah, that makes sense. Different industries handle different types of data.
Right. One sector that's been particularly impacted is financial services.
Oh, like banks and stuff?
Yep, banks, insurance companies, all that. They handle a lot of sensitive data, so data protection is a big deal for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't want my bank account details just floating around.
Exactly. The Central Bank of Nigeria has its own guidelines for these institutions, emphasizing strong security, good governance, and clear consent.
So they have to go above and beyond the general NDPR requirements.
That's right. Another sector with specific rules is healthcare.
Healthcare, yeah.
Protecting patient data is essential.
Right, that's really sensitive information.
It is. So healthcare providers need explicit consent before collecting or processing any data. They also need strict security, confidentiality, and they have to give patients access to their own information.
So patients have control over their own health data.
Precisely. It's about empowering them and respecting their privacy.
I like that.
But remember, the NDPR applies to any sector that handles personal data. Telecommunications, e-commerce, education, even government services.
So it's everywhere.
Pretty much.
Okay, so how does a company actually comply with all this? Where do they even start?
Well, it can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. The key is to break it down.
Okay.
First, figure out how the NDPR applies to your organization. What data do you collect? Right.
Why? How do you process it? Who do you share it with? Once you know that, you can start making a plan.
So it's like taking inventory of your data before you can protect it.
Exactly. You need to know what you have, where it is, and how it's used.
Got it.
Next, you need a data protection policy. It outlines your commitment to data privacy, the principles you'll follow, the procedures you'll use to comply.
So it's like a data protection playbook.
Exactly.
Cool.
Then you have to put those principles into practice.
Yeah.
Implement those security measures we talked about, encryption, access controls, audits, breach response plans.
Building that digital fortress?
Yep. It's about making data protection a part of your company culture.
Right, not just something you think about once and forget about.
Exactly.
So is compliance a one-time thing, or is it, like, ongoing?
It's definitely ongoing.
Okay.
Data protection is a journey. Organizations need to review and update their practices regularly, make sure they're still compliant, and adapt as things change.
So it's about staying ahead of the curve.
Makes sense. What if a company is struggling to comply? Are there resources available to help them?
Of course. There are consultants, legal experts, tech providers, training programs, a whole ecosystem of support.
So they don't have to do it alone.
No, at all. And don't forget those DPCOs we talked about. They can help organizations understand and implement the NDPR.
Okay, good to know. So what's next for data protection in Nigeria?
Well, I can't predict the future,
Yeah.
but one thing's for sure. Data protection is only going to become more important. As technology keeps advancing, our lives are more and more digital.
So the NDPR is just the beginning.
Exactly. It's a good foundation, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Right.
We need to keep learning, stay informed, and work together.
To build a data-driven society that's also ethical.
Precisely.
I'm feeling really inspired to learn more and do my part.
That's great.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's move on to part 3. We'll explore some real-world examples of the NDPR in action. All right, we talked a lot about the NDPR, the principles, the players, all that. But I want to see it in action. Can you give me some real-world examples?
Of course. Sometimes it's easier to understand something when you see it, actually happening. So imagine you're scrolling through social media
Okay.
and you see an ad for something you were just searching for online.
Ugh. Yeah, it's like they're reading my mind.
Yeah. Kind of creepy.
Totally.
Well, the NDPR has something to say about that.
It does.
Remember purpose limitation?
Yeah.
That means they can't just use your data however they want. They need a good reason. One that aligns with why you gave them the data in the first place.
So just because I looked up running shoes online doesn't mean I should be bombarded with shoe ads everywhere I go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have the right to know what data they're collecting, how they're using it, and you can object if you think it's unfair or too intrusive.
Okay, so it's not a free pass for advertisers.
Yeah.
What about something more serious? Like applying for a loan at a bank. He has to give them so much information.
Right.
Financial history, work details, my address.
That's where data minimization is important.
Okay.
The bank can only collect what they absolutely need to evaluate your application.
So no asking for my favorite ice cream flavor.
Exactly.
Good.
And then there's integrity and confidentiality.
Right.
The bank has to protect your information. They need strong security measures like encryption, access controls, strict procedures for handling data.
So they're building a digital vault to keep my information safe.
Exactly.
But how do we know they're actually doing all that?
Accountability.
Right.
The bank has to prove they're complying with the NDPR. They need audits, documentation, all of that.
So they can't just say they're doing it, they have to show it.
Precisely.
So the NDPR sets a high standard.
It does.
But what happens if something goes wrong? Like a data breach, or a company mishandles information?
That's when NITDA steps in. They can investigate complaints, do audits, and punish organizations that break the rules.
So there are real consequences.
It's absolutely. Fines, reprimands, they can even suspend a company's data processing.
Wow. So companies can't afford to ignore this?
No.
But what about us? As individuals, do we have a role to play?
Absolutely. It's so important to know your rights under the NDPR and to speak up if you think something's not right.
Okay.
You can complain to NITDA, even take legal action in some cases.
So we're not just sitting here hoping for the best.
No, you have a voice. By using your rights, you're helping to make sure the NDPR is actually working.
This has been so helpful. I feel like I've gone from being kind of scared of all this data stuff to actually feeling like I can protect myself.
That's great to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning. Stay curious, ask questions, stand up for your rights.
I will. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the NDPR. Remember, knowledge is power. Understand your rights, make smart choices about your data, and you can navigate the digital world safely. Until next time, stay data savvy.